I'd like to introduce to you someone who has already made a tremendous difference in my spiritual center, because Dr. Ruth Miller is an agent for change. And she has codified and organized and is still doing more for the Emerson Theological Institute. And that is impactful in more ways than we can imagine. Because what all of us need to do is to follow our inner callings first, but to teach teachers and provide an avenue for people to move out into the world to bring our message. And Emerson Theological does that in an unbiased, marvelous way with a clear path forward. And thank you for bringing clarity and uniformity to something that was lovingly done, but not uniform, right? The Reverend Dr. Ruth Miller is an ordained New Thought minister serving unity, science of mind, and Unitarian centers all across Oregon. With degrees, academic degrees, not theological degrees, in anthropology, environmental studies, cybernetics, and systems science, as well as the earned Doctor of Divinity, Ruth has written dozens of reports and books on the future of our culture and the history of New Thought. Dr. Ruth hosts a radio show on consciousness. She teaches classes and maintains several websites providing resources for the curious. This past year, Dr. Miller was named Provost of Emerson Theological Institute, providing ministry training, continuing education, and advanced degrees in New Thought spiritual studies. Dr. Ruth is truly an agent for change on planet Earth, and she's making a big difference in our lives. Please help me welcome Dr. Ruth Miller. Hello, my darling. Do big talk. Here's your mic.
All right, let me put
All right.
down. Got to put something down here.
Water.
Water.
All right.
Clicker. Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to take a totally different step. She was 5 generations in New Thought. I'm 5 generations academic. Let's see, did I? We need a little of that? All right. So when I was in graduate school, we used to have these debates and conversations around what is wisdom. And I come from, you heard that background. I'm going to start with cybernetics because it is the science of information, flows, and systems. That's really what it's about. And then we're going to look at a little bit of what traditional Western psychology has to say, what religions generally have to say, what our mystical traditions and New Thought have to say about wisdom, and then finally, where we are going in this culture. Let's see if I can pull all that off. So when we were in cybernetics, we were saying all information first is just data. And you combine bits of data into patterns that connect, you get information. The information you get to begin to work with it, it becomes knowledge. And then as you integrate it, you embody it, as Robert and others have said, it becomes wisdom. So what is data? Data are individual points, an on-off, right? Light or dark, a bit of data. The wall, the ceiling. The distinction between one or another, that's a bit of data. Now you can have many bits in forms like this graph, and they're useless, but they're essential. Data, another point of data is I see a body sleeping in a doorway. That's all. I can't do anything. So as Gregory Binford helped us to see, information is when we create a pattern connecting those bits of data. And each and every one of us, because we are human beings, that's what we do. We make patterns. If you're wondering why people come up with conspiracy theories, it's because people are making patterns from the data they're looking at. But they don't have all the data they need to make patterns that are effective for everyone to use. So a huge part of what we need to do is pay attention to the patterns we are making and not rely on a single or inadequate set of bits of data. Make sense? Yeah. So the pattern connecting the bits of on, off, light, dark, ceiling, wall is the switch on the wall turns the light on the ceiling on and off. I have information. That's useful information. Or a comparison of the output of 3 companies in 4 categories of activity. That's information. It's not sufficient to make any useful choices, but it is information. So that's the next piece. If I've got data organized into patterns, then I have information that I can share. All right? Person sleeping in the doorway, well, there's other bits that can be connected to that, right? And if I'm paying attention, I'm going to have a lot of bits connected to that. And even more bits connected to that. So this approach, this diagrammic approach, actually was developed by the Quakers in the 60s. We called it social macroanalysis. It was the very first class I taught in the cybernetic systems program, because we were trying to help people find, how do you decide what you're going to focus on? That's what they were looking at. The American Friends Service Committee was trying to decide, what are we going to focus on to make a change? All right? So we have this issue, and then we have things contributing to that issue, and then we have things contributing to that, and you go on for however long you're willing to go on. But it's still information. However, if I start adding in my other information or bits of data that are about what I or we can do, I can select from that range of things that are contributing to that situation the place that we can go, that I can go. So I have skills that have to do with homes. I have had more addresses than birthdays. And I also have connections with people who know things like real estate and mortgages and contracting and so on. So for me, looking at that issue of there aren't enough places for people to sleep, but they're sleeping in doorways, it was, I can help create more pieces and more places, right? So for about 5 years, actually most of the time I was in ministry training, I was working with nonprofits. And we found that because of some federal policies, our inner city community had about 1 house on every block that was being abandoned and going derelict. And so we started connecting people, and we created a little nonprofit, and we managed to turn a few of those houses around. And for the cost of what it did, what it cost us to have that house fixed, we were able to sell the house to low-income families. But then we discovered something. Not everyone knows how to live in an owned house if you grew up several generations of renting. So I created a class. This is how you own a house. And I gave people a handbook. This is how you live in this house and keep it. And then we connected with other nonprofits, and we set up a housing center, and we had mortgage lenders, and we had real estate people, and we had other social service people, and we had this little housing center. Over the next 5 years, 500 houses that had been abandoned, were empty, were now sold to low-income households. Starting with this kind of a thing. It was hard to see people sleeping in the doorway. That was knowledge. I could take the information and apply it with the skills that I have. The ability to apply the information to achieve our intentions and goals. we turned the inner city around. It is now a mixed race, mixed age, mixed income district, and instead of the inner city. And, oh, we got rid of redlining in the process. Thank you. That wasn't me by myself. There was no way I could have done all that by myself. But with the help and the engagement, as you all were saying yesterday morning, of agencies and other groups that were at least a little bit interested, we made it happen. We had 5 different nonprofits at one point. It was gorgeous. All right, so I have the knowledge to reach for the switch on the wall to turn the light on, right? I don't just have the information, I have the knowledge. I have the knowledge to select which of those is useful to me. I want the one that has the least output. So I'm going with the process that these 3 companies have tried that is giving me the least output of that issue. For me, that was Escambia Bay in Florida when I was a Navy wife. We would cross the bridge across the bay around Pensacola and Milton, that area, for those of you who know that area. There was a fish kill almost every 2nd or 3rd week. Huge, the whole cover of the bay. Dead fish. What was that? Well, it turned out that right up the river, there were 2 different chemical plants, and they were dumping into the river, which killed the fish in the bay. So, data, that was data. Combine it with a few more bits of data, it turned out that the 2 different chemical plants were importing from other places the things the other one was dumping into the river. We put them together. Knowledge. And we showed them how they could save money, and we stopped having fish kills. It's little things, right? Bringing those skills together from the data to the information to the knowledge. In cybernetics, then, wisdom is when we begin to internalize the data and information in a way that when we act on the knowledge, it actually moves us toward the ideal. Okay? The technical definition of cybernetics is communication and control in living and mechanical systems. It's how you get to the moon. You keep changing, right? You achieving a goal. A cybernetic system is one that has either a specific goal or a homeostatic balance, a dynamic balance of beingness, right? We're all cybernetic systems. When I was teaching, my kids were in grade school, and I had one class that was before they got to school. So I'd sit them on the desk next to me. I had 2 undergraduate classes. Anyway, I'd sit the kids there and I'd go, "This is a cybernetic system. Tell me why." Because there's all this information flow supporting and sustaining that being. And that's something to be aware of. That, we're used to thinking about spirit out there. But if spirit isn't flowing in and through us and guiding and supporting us, we are not alive. We're not living systems. So I came into New Thought out of this understanding of the nature of people and things and relationships. So wisdom then not only says, I've internalized this in a way that moves me toward what I am attempting to becoming, but I've also considered many sources of information. I haven't accepted just one, right? It's not just a single feedback loop like a thermostat or a cruise control on your car. It's many different interacting loops together, and I'm willing to look at all of them. And then I'm looking at the past to help create a future that is in alignment with my ideals. Now, if I'm in the realm of psychology, I'm going to define wisdom a little differently. It's saying I've internalized the knowledge from many experiences, but it also says that I have incorporated social and biological norms and expectations into my actions. It was wise of someone to do the normal thing as opposed to go out and do something offbeat, right? We're not being wise, according to psychology, when we're sitting in, she's not here today, doing a sit-in at the government offices. That's not wise, but we know better. So a psychologist would say being in conformity with the social norms is a part of, an aspect of, a demonstration of wisdom to guide your choices, to align with your goals and intentions, and to be comfortable. Psychology is designed to help us be comfortable in the norms of the culture we're living in. Which is why I often do not recommend therapy for my people. Because they are definitely not needing to learn to be comfortable. They're needing to learn to be, as Robert pointed out, authentically who they are. And that's one of the wonderful things about this time in history, is it is a big part of this shifting culture to be authentic. We have space and support for being authentic, which is absolutely in contradiction to what religion teaches. Because wisdom in religion is to internalize the spiritual teachings and follow them. That's it. That's why we're not a religion. That's why we're a tradition, we're a movement. We are spiritual, but we are not a religion, religio, binding together, right? So, for example, the Golden Rule, which is a great thing to internalize and follow, but the laws, the commandments, the rituals and traditions that may or may not acknowledge the power of the Golden Rule, right? So wisdom in a religion is not necessarily the same as religion in any other form. And then we get to wisdom in the mystical traditions, in New Thought. And this is what we've been talking about here, this going in, find that essence. I love that essence and being are the same word, right? Find that essence and become aware of that guiding presence that always says yes, even if what I've been being is not exactly what I want. Right? So a huge part of wisdom in our tradition is to recognize what we're actually being. And the data points to look at are the world around us. We know what we believe by looking at our lives, looking at what we're driving, how we're living. Right? That's how we know what we believe. And wisdom in our tradition is recognizing that every one of us is being totally, unconditionally loved and accepted, and expressing that. Now that's a very different idea of wisdom from anything else I've said before, unless you realize that the data points and the patterns that connect the information and the knowledge are what we were trained in our New Thought training. And some of us had it at birth. Was it yesterday? Someone was telling me that she was finding herself composing songs to God when she was 2. Yeah. When I came into this room the first day, you all were data points. As we moved through the day, you became information for me. Now I'm beginning to feel like you're a part of my knowledge base. It's pretty fun. Well, we have a new culture emerging. Everything that we have known as systems and structures are falling apart because something new is trying to emerge. The egg is cracking, and the dragon is about to come out of the shell. We're not chicks. And we can see this in leadership and management and in spiritually aware communities. I'm going to quickly go through this because I only have a few more minutes, but I thought you would love it. Leadership, as we were taught it under the old rules of religion and psychology, was someone is in control and has all the answers, and we listen to them. Leadership, as it began to emerge in the last 50 years, particularly in the tech companies, is this team management where, we're working together to make this happen, but I'm still in charge, right? Leadership, as it began to emerge, thanks to Stephen Covey and Scott Peck and those guys, is we need to be here to support the folks who are doing the work. We need to pay attention and make sure that they're achieving their goals as well as we are all together achieving our goals. This is knowledge, okay? So step one is at the point of data. I'm only paying attention to what your output is. Step two is at the point of information. I'm looking at the connections. Step three is we are all together accomplishing what it is we're setting out to accomplish. What is emerging today is stage 4 leaders, what are called wisdom-based leaders or sourcing leaders. Joe John Paulsky's book, Source, is a good place to go for that information. The idea is exactly what we're teaching here. Do you believe CEOs are being taught to go inside and follow the guidance? I had the delight to be able to write one of the textbooks for that a couple years back. So when we're looking at leadership number 4, we're looking at self-renewing leaders, ones that are going inside, getting that awareness of the guidance. It's a mystical process, and they're becoming aware that they have to allow everyone to be authentically who they are, including themselves. No performance. So that's leading into spiritually aware communities. We're seeing that growing at the grassroots. While the CEOs are being taught to live from wisdom and source, the grassroots are beginning to say, yes, 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 let me feel that, let me be that, let me focus on harmonious relationships rather than adversarial relationships. So I'm going to not spend any time with these tables, but if you go to the Gaia Living Systems Institute site, you will see the details. We have grown up in an empire culture. Empire culture is about 6,000 years old. The Mayan calendar described it beautifully, and it's ending. And what is emerging is based on what has always been in place, the indigenous cultures. Yeah? And so there are some values and assumptions among the empire cultures that has to do with the basic value is acquire, accumulate, and control. The beliefs associated with that are what we are seeing in the world around us. If you want to know what you believe, look at the world around you, right? Whereas in the indigenous cultures, there's much more alignment with our new thought teachings. It's a mystical base, that there is this constant source of supply, we call it spirit. There are values that come with accumulating, acquiring, and controlling that are different from the values of sharing and being in harmonious relationship. And these values are part of what we're seeing fighting in a way. They're in conflict with each other. And so sometimes it'll be this one and sometimes it'll be the other. So what is emerging now is a new kind of a culture that is much more like the old indigenous cultures. And there is only one. There is one people, one planet, one beingness throughout all that is all in an infinite field of eternal loving intelligence. And we are called to live according to principles that support that. And wisdom then is living by principles that acknowledge the one, that we are. And that includes how we build our houses, how we get from place to place, how we clothe ourselves, how we feed ourselves. And we find that we can look at different parts of the world, different geographies, different microclimates, and adjust to be in harmony with those. And life is no longer about acquiring, accumulating, or controlling anyone, anywhere, because the infinite all that is constantly working with us, in us, through us, as us, and for everyone. Thank you very much.